the man who needs no introduction on the Strong Stoic.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, man. So you have something I'm excited about, actually, which is a course on wisdom. I'm excited to see how it's received by everyone. And so, well, I guess just to start, man, what's up with that? What's up with your new course?
Well, like as you know, a few months back, I started this reading in the good life, which is basically just a weekly meetup every Friday at noon, and it explores selected passages from a particular book, like one book per month. And it's been great. It's been well received. I've really enjoyed connecting with new people and having conversations about really deep and important topics in my view. A few of the books that we've discussed have been Thomas Merton's New Seeds of Contemplation, and then Thich Nhat Hanh's No Mud, No Lotus. And this month, we're chatting about Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. So it seems like there's an interest in, connecting and having conversations about, I generally call it like the art of living. So I thought maybe, this could be an opportunity to provide a space for people to connect and contemplate. And this is going to be a little more structured, but not so much. I'm calling it Wisdom 101, and it's based on an article that I wrote a few months back, which has probably been the most popular article that I've done in the way of reads and likes and all of that type of stuff on Substack. The Timeless Art of Leading a Life, and it's a bit more structured. Like you and I have had many conversations about a philosophy of life, and it's really that, and it's hopefully as practical as it can be, but it's going to systematically really look at timeless perspectives on the world. How do we see the world? Timeless principles, things that we're all familiar with, definitely all the listeners of your show, like cardinal virtues, theological virtues, maybe if there's time, and then finish up with a few timeless practices. Things like meditation, journaling, contemplation. There's so many of these things, but basically that's it in a nutshell, in the way of perspectives, principles, and practices, and how we might think about those in leading our life.
That's awesome, man. Man, I didn't know that was based on an article that did really well for you. That's like a great way to know what you should probably be doing if you're doing stuff like you and I are doing, podcasts and blog articles and all that. It's like, well, let's throw a bunch of shit out there and see what sticks. Let's see what
Yeah.
people actually like.
And I felt bad at, because every Monday I do this article that tries to cover three things, and it's such a brief, intro, if you will.
Right.
And this was no different. I think I put something at the end of, there's much more to be said on this topic, but just a real quick, maybe 10,000 foot view of a philosophy of life, leading a life. So I'm excited for the opportunity to expound and maybe explore a bit of these topics and see what people are curious about.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think one of your biggest strengths as I'll say it, as a philosopher, is that you're really good at bringing shit down to earth, and I think that's so important, man. I know you and I talk about that a lot, and I think that's where we connect a lot. Is if it's not useful, why the hell are we talking about it, right?
Yeah.
But not to say that some ideas that aren't practical aren't interesting, or you cannot get curious about it, but at the end of the day, if you can't implement it, what the hell is the point, right? So I think we both really value that. So I'm happy that that's going to be incorporated into the Wisdom 101.
Yeah, no guarantees, but I hope so. um, Something that's helped me out in the way of bringing some of these down in my own life. You think of like one of the perspectives that we're going to talk about this week in the meetup. In the meetups, maybe I should say what the course consists of. It's a short email that goes out every Monday morning, and then Wednesday at noon Eastern, we're going to connect for an hour and go through some quick slides, and there'll be a little bit of structure, but mostly kind of an open space to have conversations. But something we're going to talk about on Wednesday is impermanence. This idea that nothing lasts, or this too shall pass. It doesn't seem at first glance, at least for me, like, wow, this is extremely important. There's a lot to gather from this. I don't know. It seems almost so common sense that there's not much to really get deep into, but there really is. I mean, if you look at these spiritual traditions like Buddhism, for example, impermanence it's like Buddhism 101. It's just a central thing. It's so much in Stoicism and other traditions, but it's just this eternal truth. And there's different levels of understanding. Like, we have to assume that there are people that understand this at a deeper level and understand things that maybe we don't know. Um, but I think about looking at it as in the way of the self. How does this influence this particular perspective? How I see myself and maybe how I navigate my particular path? How does this influence how I see others? And then third, how does this influence how I see the world and how I make sense of things? So with any of these, and I mean, you could do that same particular 3 points of view on virtues, courage. I mean, you just name it. It applies. But how can you look at something and then maybe shift and look at it in another way from another perspective, zoom out maybe and look at the world? So, um, long story short, I think it's helpful to maybe sit with some of these ideas beyond, the initial first glance and think about it in a deeper way.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of contemplation on impermanence, and I think I've valued from your wisdom on that for sure through our discussions. But one of the things that kind of like disheartening for me is I heard someone say this on a podcast. I don't even think it was a philosophy podcast, but it was some conversation between two people, and they were talking about, I think, standing up when you work or something like that. Like, you have standing. I have a standing desk. I love standing up for work. Um, and he said, "Well, sometimes it's more comfortable to sit down." But what he said that I was like, "Oh shit, that sucks that that's true." Is no matter how comfortable you get, it's going to be uncomfortable soon.
Yeah.
So you can get in your most comfortable lazy boy and get the pillow behind your neck just right. Support your back and get the TV going, and you're going to be uncomfortable in like 20 minutes. And I think that's really on the practical level that really made me understand impermanence. It's like no matter how strong you get, no matter how comfortable you are right now, no matter how you feel right now, good or bad,
Yeah.
it's going to change. And it doesn't matter if it's good right now. Like, again, I'm comfortable right now. That doesn't mean it's still gonna be like that for me in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes. So I think that's a thing that we often I agree with you, we overlook all the time.
And it's interesting because it applies to both sides of it. Some sort of pleasurable, beautiful experience. I have young kids. This nice experience with one of my kids. This too shall pass. Like some sort of frustrating, annoying, thing that might bring about a little bit of anger. It won't last. It will pass. So it's like everything. And you think of so many of these practices, memento mori, many others, they're really about helping us to see the truth. It's not some sort of magic pixie dust or anything like that. It's just helping us to see reality a bit clearer because it's just the truth. This too shall pass. But we totally, yeah, we miss it. We so easily forget some of these things. And some of these eternal truths, they're not always the most inspiring.
Mhm.
You know, I
Yeah.
heard in a recent podcast I was listening to yesterday, The Daily Stoic with Ryan Holiday and Mark Manson. They were talking about The Secret, the book,
Yeah.
just this ginormous, like best-selling, book, and it's enjoyable to read. They were talking about how it's enjoyable to think that, but it's not how the world works. It's just simply, you know, um, and they're doing a bit of another thing of pointing to these eternal truths, which I think can be inspiring. It can have this good feeling to see what is true, but at first it might not be, as inspiring as something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's something I
Excuse me.
gained a lot of no, no, I gained a lot of clarity on this, this year, in the very it's only the 16th, but I kinda got this clarity this year that, man, the stuff that really matters, like, the stuff that's gonna allow you to flourish, it's like the things that you have to do every day. Like, there's no it's like, okay, some people get annoyed that they have to go grocery shopping, and I thought about this the other day, a weird thought. If I could do 2 days worth of grocery shopping, just get it out of the way, and then I would never have to grocery shop for the rest of the year. It's like, would I do that? And then because you can play that game with everything. If I just made my bed, like if there was a universe where I made my bed 365 times one day, and then the rest of the year would be made, like would I do that or would I want to do that? And being who I am, I probably would, but that's just not the universe we live in. Like some things you have to do every day. Things like practicing gratitude and all this stuff. So and things like hard work. Like you can't it doesn't matter how much you've worked hard in the past. It doesn't matter how much you've done. It's like you still have to do that every day as opposed to this switch that you just click and then oh my bed's made for the rest of the year, right? Like it
Yeah.
just doesn't work that way. Which is a hard truth of existence, but it's true.
It's funny because it's paradoxically, we think, and in a certain way, we do want certainty. We want to know what's coming. We have this desire for certainty. But if we watch any sort of show, movie, show, whatever it may be, and it's just unbelievably predictable, there's no
Mhm.
sort of twists and turns. It's not enjoyable. I mean, really, the thing that brings a bit of joy is the surprises, the wonder. It's like the uncertainty of life. So it's this weird thing of we're desiring something that we really don't want. You know how the research talks about the like hedonic treadmill? We desire some sort of thing and then we get it and it didn't really bring us any joy. We were essentially wrong. It's there's some similarities there when it comes to certainty of desiring that. We really don't want it, and we should remind ourselves that life is uncertain.
Mhm.
Life is imperfect. It's it's impermanent. And that's what is beautiful about
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I spoke with a woman
it.
yesterday. I had her on the podcast, and she was talking. She's an artist, and she was talking about how she always gets these same thoughts. She's been painting for like 10 years, right?
Mm,
Selling her paint, like a successful artist here locally, and she always gets these thoughts: uh, reluctance to do it,
mm.
feeling inadequate, um, and every day she kind of has to go through that process. And we talked about yesterday that like, us all think that that's a bad thing? Like, what if that is part of the process. It's not a bad part. It's not like, oh, I gotta feel these terrible things. It's like, no, that actually is part of the process. And I feel the same thing with like things like going to the gym, which I've been doing forever. You get
Yeah.
this reluctance, this laziness, and we have this tendency to label that as like a bad part of it. It's like, oh, a bad part of exercising every day is that you have to be anxious and uncomfortable for the first 20 minutes because you don't really want to do it. But what makes us think that that's a bad thing? Because you can't take it away. That's the kind of realization that we came to yesterday. You can't remove that from the process and expect to just only get the good parts. It's kind of like, and again, I'm using good and bad lightly here, like the uncomfortable, the unpleasantness of it. That's
Yeah.
almost part of it in and of itself. Can't detach it.
Yeah, it's interesting that I'm a big fan of the guy Stephen Pressfield who wrote The War of Art, but he's on a lot of podcasts and talks about this, and he's still, after some 3 or 4 decades of writing, that's super successful, and he still says even today he faces this resistance.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, there's this book, A Liberated Mind, came out a few years ago by this author, Stephen C. Hayes. He's the founder of ACT, Acceptance Commitment Therapy, really popular, supposedly, as he talks like the research backed, just a really good thing in the therapy world and stuff like that. And he suggests in this book that our thought stream, like all our thoughts, that we give it a name, like as a person, like this is me, and then maybe my thought stream is John, which is, it's a bit strange
Hmm.
to think about it. And he stresses that you don't want to necessarily label it in any sort of negative way, but it's like we all, and I think experientially you can notice this, but we all have some sort of voice or person on our shoulder that is saying something that is maybe counter to what we want to do. We're trying to lead our life, we're trying to make art, go to the gym, whatever it may be, write, and there's some sort of voice that is bringing this noise. And in a way, and especially like if you do this and navigate life, it's like this particular voice is trying to help. They're trying to provide some sort of protective, whatever it may be. It depends on the scenario, but it's like an interesting thing of thinking about ourselves as multiple selves.
Mm.
If there's a bit of competing demands. I don't know that one popular quote where it's like, do I contradict myself? Like, yes, I have multitudes, but it is like an interesting thing. Like, how does that sit with you in terms of naming your thought stream as coming
Yeah.
from someone else? Is that too weird?
No, it's not weird. Actually, this is what I spoke to with Kristen. That's the woman I spoke with yesterday. We
Yeah.
spoke about this too, and again, got a really interesting thought on this during that conversation. Is that I often think about the two voices in your head: the stronger self, the weaker self. You could also think about it like the therapist and the client. One tells you to obviously do the things you need to do, get up, go to work, go to the gym, blah, blah, blah. And then the weaker self says, nah, stay on the couch. I'm going to sleep in a little bit. I'm tired, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that, how a lot of times we think about the weaker self as like in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like we think like we have a bad feeling in our mouth when we say the weaker part of ourselves. But then I made this connection that it's maybe the better way of thinking about it is it's kind of like how you deal with a child. So when you have a child, for example, and you have young children, there's lessons that they don't understand. Things like why you should probably get up at the same time every day, or things like why you should probably do your work before you play. Like
Mm.
these basic things that we all kind of know in life. So there's all these things that these basic lessons that adults normally have that children don't have. But if you're trying to get your child to learn a lesson, okay, you just got home from school, let's do your homework. So you walk them through you're trying to get them to work before they play. There's just going to be like a little bit of a, oh, dad, I don't want to do that. Come on, I want to play. Come on. And you as the parent, you don't, you're not angry at the child for saying that. You're not pissed off. You're just like, no, come on. We're going to do it, kiddo. That's the exact same way I think that we have to think about our weaker self. It's like you're laying on the couch and your weaker self goes, come on, let's just stay on the couch. I'm comfortable. And you go, it's okay that you felt that way, but no, we're going to get up and go.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not, no, screw you. We're getting up. I hate you. It's no, because that's a part of you. You can't get rid of that. So I don't know. What do you think about that relationship as someone who has kids?
Yeah. And I wonder the idea of, say, even like weaker self, like we've talked about before, of maybe that voice is saying, I don't feel like going to the gym today. And we've heard Jocko Willink say, it's like, well, I'm going to go today, but maybe if I still feel that way tomorrow, I'm going to take the day off. Because it is true in terms of this voice might have a point.
Yeah.
Might have a point in terms of whatever it may be. It's like, maybe like the kid needs to play, get 15 minutes, do some stuff, and then play some more for an hour. Like maybe there's this energy buildup in you that you got to kind of run it out and run around. Now, and that's where it gets difficult to discern of when do you necessarily like listen to this voice? When do you say, hey, thanks for the unsolicited information here, but I'm going to continue? Because if you I think monitor this and are a bit mindful of the thoughts, a lot of times it's for our own safety and protection. We might not be in danger, but it's somehow associated to that. Like if you were walking down a trail and you saw like a piece of fruit on a tree and you went to maybe go grab it and eat it, you'd have a thought that might come in as like, well, is this safe to eat?
Mm.
And that's it's a good point, Bob. Thanks for that thought. Like,
Yeah.
and then other times it's just not. You're getting ready to paint. This is something that you have decided to do. Like this particular person, it's their profession, and you're getting this voice of resistance. Maybe we could acknowledge it, but we're still going to navigate and move forward and do what needs to be done.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
you got a point there. Is that sometimes the child is right.
Yeah.
So your kid comes home from school. You say, "Come on, we got to go sit down and do your homework." Oh, but dad, I don't want to. You as the father go, "That's not a good excuse." You might not say it that blatantly, but you'll say, "No, come on, we got to do." Say, "Oh, but I'm tired." Say, "Well, that's not a good excuse either." No, come on, we got to do the work. "Oh, but dad, my friend is leaving for Cuba for 2 months tomorrow and I want to see him tonight."
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
actually a good reason. Why don't you take the night off and then we'll get back on it tomorrow? So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It is helpful to have that voice, but you have to. This is like where I think reason comes in. Is you have to be able to discern between the two, and we're really that's wisdom, and that leads me to the question that I wanted to ask you because I want to take advantage of your contemplation. Obviously, you've been thinking a lot about this course, Wisdom 101. What is wisdom, Josh Bertolotti? What is wisdom?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like as you know, but maybe some of your listeners don't. I started this podcast, In Search of Wisdom, a couple years ago, And I generally close most conversations with that question: what is wisdom? And I've had over 100 different responses to that. And all of those responses are probably in the category of wise responses. So it's many different things, which is not the greatest answer maybe on a podcast conversation. But just to say that, it's like anything that I say is maybe a piece or an angle or, and perspective. And I think what we were just talking about, that discerning process, there is like a wise response to things. Like when it comes to suffering in hardships and things like that, there is a wiser perspective and response than others. But of course, it's dependent and interconnected on the situation and all sorts of things. But long story short, I think it's connected if we think from a practical way as becoming wiser, living our highest good, as it's some sort of recipe. It's many different things, just like any sort of recipe. If you're making something or creating something, there are time tested ways. If it's an apple pie or writing a book or, any sort of thing, there are some time tested truths of how to do that. And from a wisdom thing, to me, it connects with what I was talking about in the beginning of the conversation of, how are we seeing ourselves? How are we seeing others? How are we seeing the world? What are the time tested perspectives to view things? And then you move to principles, and it's the same thing. How do we integrate these time tested virtues, cardinal virtues, theological virtues into our daily lives? Not only just for ourselves and how we navigate our path, but how we interact with others, how we interact with the world itself. And then, like, what practices are we putting into place? If it's like journaling and like these go together. I see it like three legs of a stool. If you're missing one, you're missing a lot. You really don't have a stool if you're missing one of those legs. And in the way of practices, if we think about meditation or journaling, for example, or contemplation, you need the wise perspectives, things like impermanence, interconnectedness, beginner's mind, things like that. You need the cardinal virtues. They all work together in concert or in harmony, if you will, because without, for example, and I know I'm going on for a while here, but without, say, cardinal virtues, for example, some sort of principles or values that you want to live by, at the end of the day, when you sit down to reflect or examine your day, if you don't have some sort of markers or some sort of direction of where you want to head, how can you even examine your day? What are you reflecting on? So, long story short, maybe that's a bit of an intro into it of how some of these things work together. And I do think, in a way, it's easier than maybe we might think. I do think we have more inner wisdom than we might think if we can start to cultivate the, you know, wise ways of looking at seeing, doing, and practicing in daily life. I think you can really significantly improve the quality of your life by adopting a coherent philosophy of life, because we all have a philosophy of life. It's just the question is how wise is it? Is it a time tested, really really coherent philosophy of life? That's really the question to ask.
Love it, man. I gotta add one perspective there. something useful to think about and ask yourself is, where would I be? Who would I be if I just simply stopped doing everything I know to be wrong?
Yeah.
To get back to your inner wisdom thing. It's like, I don't know how to make my life better. It's like, you probably know a few things you could change to make your life better. Maybe you don't
Yeah.
know all the answers. No one knows all the answers. But if you just stop doing the things that you knew was wrong, where would you be? That's such a scary question, to be honest, because if you're like me, you find out that, holy shit, I'm doing a lot of stuff that I could probably not be
Yeah.
doing. Um, where can people find the course? When's it starting? So this is going to come out on Thursday, which is, just so I get the date. So this is coming out on January 19th, this podcast episode. So
All right.
where can people find it?
So on the 18th, the day before, so Wednesday noon Eastern, we're gonna basically do a quick kind of intro and an overview and things like that, and then the following Wednesday at noon Eastern, we're going to really, get into the concepts, and the course is really starting then. And that'll be, 4 more weeks for that. In the way of finding it, you could go to Perennial Meditations on Substack, or you could go to perennialleader.com, look for a link, for the Wisdom 101 course. It's completely free for anybody that wants to jump on. This is really just a public service, so I encourage anybody that's interested to jump on. Once we get the first 2 weeks underway, after that, I probably won't be accepting anybody new, because these really kind of build upon one another. So for the third, fourth, and fifth week, it'll really be no new people, and we'll go through and we'll record it. So in case you're not able to attend, you'll get a recording of it the following week, so you can check it out.
Yeah, no, great, man. And I know it's going to make you slightly uncomfortable, but I've learned more from our conversations than I have reading a lot of books and stuff. Like, I take a lot of wisdom from our conversations, and so just as a review for for your
Well, appreciate
dialogue,
it.
I think anyone who's interested in it and can commit to the time, like, definitely do it, because they'll learn a lot, I think, from your dialogue and your openness.
Well, I appreciate that, and the feeling is as mutual, not only from our conversations, but from your, what I call, deep dives on the Strong Stoic podcast. I've really gained a lot of insight, and I hope to do these type of free courses maybe a few times a year. Going to take about a month break after this one, and then start a course I'm calling Perennial Habits, which will be a deeper dive into the practices. um, you don't necessarily have to do the Wisdom 101 to do that, but I think it's going to build upon that to get a deeper dive into these practices. And then after that one, I plan on doing a happiness in the meaning of life. So if anybody's interested, this could be a good time to maybe start the year with a bit of wisdom, and then there'll be some opportunities to continue if anybody wants to explore a bit further, and continue to work to integrate some of these concepts into daily life.
Love it, man. Looking forward to it.
Cool.
It's going to be a good year for you.
Yeah, cool. Appreciate it,
All right,
man.
brother. Cheers. Until next time.